We're on to our last talk. Carl Youngblood is the current president and one of the co-founders of the Mormon Transhumanist Association. He regularly engages in thought work surrounding future technological advances and has published essays on topics such as artificial intelligence, digital identity, blockchain technology, and quantum archaeology. Carl has made a career in software engineering and has worked at and co-founded several successful startups. He received a BA in Portuguese from Brigham Young University and an MS in computer science from the University of Washington.
Thanks, Steve.
So Chris talked about re-enchanting the world, and the title of my talk is Breaking the Enchantment. Creative work in a time of signs and wonders. But I intend, as is the honored tradition of the MTA, to harmonize these two views and show you why they are very compatible with each other. The conference essay this year invites us to gather, quote, not in triumph, but in solemn wonder. And there is much to be solemn about. As I'm preparing this talk, the United States has, and this may have changed since I last heard, has entered a ceasefire from launching airstrikes in Iran. This conflict has disrupted the global trade and cost lives on all sides. Our domestic politics are more fractured than at any point in my lifetime. And just this week, Anthropic published a detailed, what they call the system card for its most capable model to date, Claude Mythos, which has this name that almost seems Promethean in its connotations, right? Revealing that the system had independently discovered thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities in major operating systems, and in some cases, broken out of its own sandbox to access the internet. Anthropic took the unprecedented step of releasing it only to a handful of critical infrastructure partners before even publishing the safety report. And that's the first time that this has occurred for any kind of like major AI lab. These are signs and wonders in the most literal sense. 20 years ago, when this association was founded, such things were speculation. Now they are Tuesday's news cycle. The miraculous and the menacing have arrived together, exactly as the scriptures warned and exactly as we anticipated. So what do we do with that? I want to suggest something that may feel counterintuitive. We should be less alarmed than we are. Not because the dangers aren't real, they are, but because the mood of alarm itself has become one of the greatest dangers we face and one of the least examined. The Book of Mormon offers a deceptively simple observation. Everyone receiveth wages of him whom he listeth to obey. We tend to read this as a statement about moral choices, serving God or serving the devil, but consider it as a description of attention. The media that we consume, the narratives we seek out, the feeds we scroll, these are forms of obedience. We submit to them and they pay us in kind. Seek out outrage and you will be paid in cortisol. Seek out doom and you will be paid in despair. And as social sharing becomes faster and more pervasive, these viral moods grow more acute. Outrage is manufactured and weaponized, often funded by powerful interests who benefit from our paralysis. Clifford Geertz, the great anthropologist, defined religion as, quote, a system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pervasive, and long-lasting moods and motivations in people by formulating conceptions of a general order of existence and clothing these conceptions with such an aura of factuality that the moods and motivations seem uniquely realistic. That last phrase is what I want to hone in on, uniquely realistic. The enchantment works precisely because it doesn't feel like an enchantment. It just feels like we're seeing things clearly. The despair feels earned. The anxiety feels proportionate. The doom feels like realism. So C.S. Lewis captured this dynamic perfectly in The Silver Chair. There's this witch queen of the underworld, and she doesn't argue the heroes into submission. She enchants them with warmth, with drowsiness, with a sweet reasonableness that slowly dissolves their memory of everything above. There is no sun, she tells them. There is no Narnia. There are no lions, and it almost works. The enchantment is near complete when Puddleglum, the marshwiggle, stamps his foot into the fire and through the pane speaks one of the great declarations of defiance in all of literature. Suppose we have only dreamed or made up all those things, trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all I can say is that in that case, the made-up things seem a good deal more important than the real ones. We're just babies making up a game, if you're right, but 4 babies playing a game can make a play world which licks your real world hollow. Puddleglum doesn't win the argument on the witch's terms. He changes the terms entirely. He declares that even in a higher world, even if the higher world is a fiction, it is a fiction worth living by, and certainly worth more than the dismal realism on offer. This scene is supposed to be Puddleglum like stamping on a fire. This is the best I could get Midjourney to do. I think this is profoundly relevant to our moment. The enchantment of our age is not optimism, but despair. A sophisticated, well-informed despair that feels like wisdom, and breaking it requires not better arguments, but a different posture altogether. A friend recently told me he was worried that his son was possessed. The boy spent all his time consuming dark manga and had sunk into a deep depression. I suggested to him that whether we call it demonic possession or a mood almost doesn't matter. They are functionally equivalent. The ancients spoke of the, quote, spirit of the age, or what we sometimes call the zeitgeist. And they understood that such spirits are real forces, whatever their ontological status might be. So the question is how to break this spell. I came across a wonderful kind of analysis that examines Gandalf's method for liberating King Théoden from Wormtongue's influence as a kind of practical exorcism, right? So the steps are striking. First, you remove the poisonous influence. You have to silence Wormtongue, right? Second, get the patient outside under open sky. Third, have him stand at his full height. No more slouching, which is what the bewitchers want. Fourth, put a sword in his hand. Get him doing the things that remind him of his purpose. And fifth, reconcile him with his loved ones. What I love about this is how physical and active it is. Gandalf doesn't sit Théoden down for a therapy session about his feelings. He gets him standing, moving, armed, and reconnected. The cure for enchantment is not analysis, it is action. And this brings me to a seemingly unlikely source of wisdom, the Amish. This is supposed to be kind of like an Amish village that combines the traditional with the futuristic, right? So a 2014 Business Week investigation into Amish financial life revealed a fascinating paradox. On the one hand, the Amish are remarkably susceptible to affinity fraud, the same kind of scheme that ensnared victims of Bernie Madoff. Their trust-based culture, reliance on handshakes over contracts, and aversion to government intervention make them easy marks. The article documents millions of dollars lost to a Florida real estate scheme, a pigeon farming Ponzi scheme, and a worm farming empire run by a convicted sex offender. And yet, the Amish are, on the whole, more prosperous than their secular neighbors. The phrase Amish millionaire is no longer an oxymoron. More than half of Amish households now earn their primary income outside of agriculture, in thriving businesses that reflect genuine entrepreneurial creativity. How can a community so vulnerable to fraud nonetheless outperform? The answer, I think, lies in what they don't spend their time doing. They are not doom scrolling. They are not marinating in political outrage. They are not performing moral superiority on social media. They are building things, furniture, businesses, communities. They deliberate carefully about which technologies to adopt, not rejecting them wholesale, but asking whether each one serves their families and their faith. This, I think, is an important distinction that a lot of folks have misunderstood in the Amish, and we've probably occasionally joked about, an Amish lifestyle in a sort of dismissive way. But actually, their main distinction in how they use technology is just that they deliberate communally about how to use technology. But they don't reject technology wholesale. They just talk about it a lot and make sure that it's going to serve what they think collectively are the goals of their community and culture. So their creative productivity overwhelms their occasional losses to con artists. The Book of Mormon draws a similar contrast. Alma describes those outside the church indulging in sorceries, in idolatry or idleness, and in babblings, and in envyings and strife. While those within it, and of course this changed at different times, right? The church wasn't always really industrious, but at least at this moment it was. And while the people in the church were prospering through industry and focus. And this pattern is ancient and consistent. The people who build things outperform the people who merely react to things. So I want to be clear, I'm not arguing that we should ignore injustice or suffering. I am arguing that our perception of these things is often badly distorted, and that the distortion itself becomes an obstacle to the creative work that actually helps those situations. So consider, a decade ago, serious people were alarmed about the digital divide, the gap between those with and without smartphone access in particular. The concern was real, but within a few years, smartphone penetration exceeded 80% globally, driven not by activist campaigns, but by the relentless economics of cheap manufacturing. Paul Krugman, hardly a free market cheerleader, observed that hundreds of millions of people have been lifted from abject poverty as the indirect and unintended result of the actions of soulless multinationals. Not an edifying spectacle, but an undeniable one nonetheless. The nonpartisan American Enterprise Institute recently published research showing that the American middle class is indeed shrinking, but because families are moving upward into the upper middle class, which has tripled since 1979, while the poor and near poor have declined from 30% to 19% of the population, at least in this country. The real story is the opposite of the narrative. Once again, not denying that there are problems, but just that sometimes the results are a little counterintuitive to what we are assuming. C.S. Lewis warned that of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. The politics of grievance, when born of genuine compassion, can become its own kind of enchantment, one that exhausts the compassionate and infantilizes those it claims to serve. Many of us felt this acutely during the peak of performative activism in recent years. The energy spent on moral display might have built something lasting. I want you guys to consider the first verse of the hymn, "Come, come, ye saints. No toil nor labor fear, but with joy wend your way. Though hard to you this journey may appear, grace shall be as your day." And then the line that cuts to the heart of it, "'Tis better far for us to strive our useless cares from us to drive." And that's what I'm thinking about. The pioneers weren't just enduring hardship, they were grateful for it, because the striving itself was the cure. The toil and labor drove out the useless cares. When you're building a handcart, burying a wheel hub in river mud, hauling your family across a continent, you do not have the luxury of petty moralizing. You do not have time to cultivate outrage about distant abstractions. The work burns it off, and what the hymn tells us counterintuitively, even shockingly, is that this is a source of joy. not merely endurance. The hardship is the mercy. It frees us from the anxious, consumptive habits of mind that come from having too much time and too little purpose. I believe the corrective our community needs, and perhaps the world needs, is exactly this. Less time in consumption, more time in creation. Less scrolling, more building. Less commentary, more craft. The useless cares of our age are not driven out by better arguments or more information. They are driven out by work, meaningful, creative, demanding work that leaves no room for them. And this brings me to what we as an association are actually doing and what I'm asking each of you to pour your energy to. Over the past several months, we've been conducting serious marketing research, focus groups, audience analysis, content strategy to understand who our community really is, who's drawn to our mission, and what resonates with them. The findings have been clarifying and I think exciting. We've identified distinct audiences from deeply engaged enthusiasts who already share at least some of our vision to seekers on the periphery who are hungry for exactly the kind of framework we offer but haven't found us yet. And the guiding principle that emerged from this work is resonance over persuasion. So we're not trying to argue people into our worldview. We're trying to create work so compelling that it attracts those who are already searching. This is the Puddleglum move. This is the Amish move. We're not fighting the witch on her terms. We're building Narnia. And so I want to show you some of what that Narnia includes now. We've got, before I jump into some demonstrations, we've got several podcasts that we'll be working on. And we're also building something we're calling Project Lazarus that will be preserving the memory and legacy of loved ones through genealogy, genomics, and cryonics. We're developing something we're calling the Advent Clock, which is a data-driven dashboard tracking humanity's proximity to superhumanity. So we're looking for actual funds and research to gather actual statistical data about all the different industries and various aspects of world stats and health that would help us understand how well we're getting there. And if you caught the illusion, there was and still is this thing that's kind of dying with the scientists who created it. It's called the Doomsday Clock. And it's sort of like trying to scare humanity into like fixing things, right? And yeah, and so we're just taking kind of the opposite approach of like saying what we could be instead of what we're like careening towards. And then we're also creating something called the Mormon Civ mod, which is introducing millions of gamers to themes of industry, community, and futurism through the Civilization franchise. So, actually, I didn't queue it up, so I'm not gonna waste your time looking at it. But I have a three-dimensional model of Brigham Young walking around already, and the idea there is that we're gonna actually create a civilization patterned after the characteristics of Mormonism. Like we're probably gonna give them their settler score for those who played the game. Like they're gonna have a little bit faster rate of production of settlers, probably like easier, faster production of missionaries, I would assume, stuff like that. Anyway, it's really nerdy, but it's a fun project. So let's see. The next thing, yeah, there we go. We've got to add a few texts to the tech tree. All right. So these aren't side projects. These are acts of creative defiance. Each one a refusal to be paralyzed by the anxieties of the moment. And each one a concrete demonstration that the best responses to signs and wonders is to build something worthy of them. So we've also completely rebuilt our web presence that I'm going to show you in a sec. But none of this works without you. Every single one of these projects needs hands. Technical, creative, organizational, theological. And the question I want to leave you with is not how afraid we should be, but what are you going to build? What is the sword Gandalf would put in your hand? What is the craft the Amish would have you master? What is the world that Puddleglum would have you live for? The best answers to signs and wonders, to both the miracles and the menace of this extraordinary moment, is not fear. It is not hand-wringing. It is the patient, stubborn, faithful work of building something worthy of the future that is already arriving. And so I'm going to show you that work now. And if you have anything that you in particular feel drawn toward in those things that I talked about or anything else, like the retreat isn't over yet. So come corner me and let's talk about it. All right. Okay. So I have been, as you know from the charades game that you just played, like I've been huddled over the computer for quite some time, and that's not actually how I do it, but that's how I was told that I do it. And I must also acknowledge the patience of Cami, who has, persisted with my long computer sessions as well. She's been kind enough to keep me company while I code. So let's see, I'm going to pull this over so that you all can see this as well. Let me see if I can mirror my display so that... we've been working with an amazing artist and designer who has helped us with a lot of these visualizations. And you'll notice that we now have I'm just going to change the proportion here a little bit so you can see a little better the full extent of this. We now have a second theme to our website, and the two are called Western and Alpine. So we have this great one that was done earlier. It's a little drier, more of a Utah feel to it. We've got now this alpine landscape, and these scenes now actually are 24-hour scenes. So if you visit this at different times of the day, you will be able to witness something a little different, just to kind of add some interest and visual appeal. And there's even this little Easter egg that if you pass an hour parameter, you can see what it would look like at a given time of day. So this is like 2 a.m., I guess. We could do 20, this is like dusk, I like this one. This is pretty cool. It's about 9 p.m. One thing that, in the process of doing this, one of the things I wanted to achieve that is not currently possible with our website is that I wanted to make it so that non-technical stakeholders and helpers could log in and work on things and update them. And so I have for a while been using a content management system to do that, and McKay and I have been working together on this quite a bit, and it was helpful. It helped us to move forward and understand how to structure a complex site like this. But over time, we started experiencing these delays that were just incurred because of the complexity of what we had come up with. We had this separate backend where someone would log into to update all the content and adjust it. And there were a lot of like exposed gears and knobs and stuff that even despite it being like technically something that a non-technical person could use, it was kind of complicated. And on top of that, when we wanted to test something as developers and make sure it was working, we had to like deploy a back end and a front end and a third system that was used to log people in. And just getting that whole system up and running and functional could sometimes take like 5 minutes or more. And as we started working more and more with AI agents to build this system, we started experiencing these delays where just getting it to launch and getting it to a point where the agent could start adding and building stuff was taking quite a while. And if you are building features with agents, as we've learned over the past few months, as this field has been kind of revolutionized by it, you're often wanting to just launch like several agents at the same time, do something quick, and then close it down, and then do something else. And so if each one of those operations takes several minutes, that started to really slow us down. And I never would have thought of doing this before, but I was like, what if we just coded our own content management system? What if we just built it from scratch, right? And like a month later now, and we have a full content management system that's all kind of tailored to our needs, and a lot of those janky, like exposed gears and stuff are no longer there. So it ended up being quite a bit more easy to use as well. And that's kind of what I'm going to show you. So anyone who wants to contribute and help us out with this can now get access and become an admin or a content curator and start to contribute here. So for someone who's logged in with the right privileges, they can see lots of stats about what's in the system. I would also add that with this new system, we've now consolidated all of the content that existed on any of our prior websites or on some of those just one-off curations that somebody like Lincoln did, where he collected lots of quotes and just kind of threw them into some place, or somebody wrote something somewhere on some blog. A lot of that stuff we've just had all over the place, kind of in random places, and we've always wanted a better way to present it to the public and share it. And part of the reason why consolidating is so important is that we want this to start to be a source of dissemination for lots of information that we as an association feel that we've curated and want to share. We think of these as like the gems of the restoration, and a part of our mission is to like remind our co-parishioners of these like really important, just beautiful principles that, even though they're just right there for us to read, they sometimes don't get sufficient airtime in Sunday school, let us say. So, so we've collected all this information, and so everyone who've ever had a quote from or has ever spoken at one of our conferences, they now have an entry here, and we can essentially like have a biography of this person, some tags associated with the work that they did, some important things to know about them. And we even have this system where we can share this content online in a way that just looks really attractive and makes it nicer for us to put on social media somewhere. So as you can see, like we have this share option. So if you were to post the link to this author on Facebook or on Twitter or somewhere else, you'd have this kind of great visualization of the website background with their portrait done in a kind of cool like pen and ink. It's called a head cut style. And you have this like choice of 3 different sort of themes to use when you share. I should also point out, this is something I sometimes describe, like some people may have wondered, as I was designing the theme, what I was trying to go for in this theme. I'm really proud of it and kind of like to share this. So the background and the little subtle animations and stuff are there not to distract the reader, but just to kind of like paint a picture of some brilliant future that humanity might have, to give us this like awe-inspiring glimpse of our capacities. And then as I was doing this, I was like, okay, well, I've got this beautiful background, so I don't want to cover it all up with text. Like, I don't want to make it so that all this effort that was spent on making the background look nice is like mostly hidden by the foreground. So what I did instead was I created a kind of blurred backdrop against which all the text would appear. And I also didn't want the foreground illustrations to kind of like cover things up either. So you'll notice that these illustrations actually have a transparent background to them. So what that means is, like, as that little air taxi is going through Lorenzo Snow's head, you can see it behind his head, right? And it's kind of a fun story in and of itself here, how we got there. So this style actually is comes from the Wall Street Journal, and it's called a head cut style. And part of why we adopted this style was that it allows us to then strip out all the white pixels and make them transparent, and still make a very discernible and interesting illustration, but also like not occlude the background. And another kind of interesting side bonus I feel of this particular style is it's kind of vintage looking. It's sort of got a retro vibe to it. And what I think it does, this might be more subtle than most of the visitors are thinking, but like I'm thinking through the grand vision of this, is that it really can provoke a sense of deep time in the visitor. Because what we're doing is we're like creating an anachronism of the vintage, portraits juxtaposed with this beautiful, colorful, playful background that's kind of futuristic. And so you're like inspired, in my opinion, to kind of like snap out of your day-to-day concerns and get into more of a sense of the grand arc of history and where we've been and where we're headed. So there is like there is a rhyme or a reason to this rhyme, whatever you call it. And if someone likes one of these quotes, they can basically click on it and share it. There's more features still being built, but in the process of doing this, we also expanded and made our primers. These are our sort of introductory texts a little bit more easy to understand, and added some information there. We also recently have added, so we've got, I think this is worth highlighting here as well. Our prior kind of mission tagline said something along the lines of the Mormon Transhumanist Association promotes abundant flourishing through the compassionate use of science and technology, which is nice, but it doesn't necessarily convey some sort of specific target audience, nor does it convey a more of a concrete notion of like what is being built and why, and more specific and actionable, I think. And so with this new tagline, what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to highlight that we're targeting a specific demographic, which is the rising generation. Obviously, we welcome everyone, but we would like to especially inspire a new generation of pioneers. And the part of why I use that imagery of the pioneer, it's also the title of our podcast, is that this is one of our great legacies as Latter-day Saints. Like, we often still refer to the pioneers. We have Pioneer Day. We are regularly talking about them in our curriculum, and justly proud of their achievements. But at times, it can turn into, if we're not careful, this like sort of polishing the sepulchers of the dead prophets, instead of focusing on where the current frontiers are and what the current challenges of our generation are, and characterizing the activities of today that people today who are blazing new trails are engaged in. And so that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to also make it clear, more clear than our last tagline, how important faith and our sort of religious zeal is to this whole enterprise. So being able to bring to these frontiers the full vibrance of their faith is kind of what we're trying to inspire people to do. And so that's some of what motivated that wording. We have a frequently asked questions section that I encourage you guys to take a look at. By the way, all of this is about to go live. I would say we're awfully close, definitely by the end of the month, but probably sooner than that. But it's already online. You can just go to next.transfigurism.org. So just substitute the current www for next, and you're there. The only reason I haven't like flipped the switch on the old one is that there might have been a few little functionalities that people are still using that until we're fully launched, I wanted to leave there. But that's about to change. And I want to show, I think, at least one more little glimpse of some of the features. I would also add that we have our chapters, our regions, and our meetups now all on this. And Steve, I think, and McKay will both be grateful that we now have text and WhatsApp notifications for all upcoming events, and we can automate those reminders and stuff like that. So there's no need for Steve to madly be texting all of his friends like he did so well. Thank you, Steve, wherever you are. Let me show you, I think, one of these things that I was kind of in the middle of before I close here. If I go to just the author's page one more time, let's suppose that we have a quote from some important person who has something to say about transhumanism, right? So I'm going to put in Yuval Harari. Isn't that how you spell his name? I'm just trying to remember. Harari, right? All right, so I haven't done this before, so we're going to see together if the system works well or not, all right? But I have littered the UI with what I call sparkle buttons, and that's these little sparkle icons, right? And these are the buttons that trigger some kind of AI assistance, right? So for the source portrait, I'm just going to click this, and we're going to see like it's going to go out to the web and look for potential images of Yuval Harari if it's working correctly. Oh, that didn't work. Yeah, for some reason. Anyway, sorry about that. Let's just do this the way it would have happened. But if we go to, I just showed this to somebody yesterday and it was working fine. So I don't know exactly what went on there. But it would essentially pick an image and you'd be able to say, oh, that's the one I want, right? So I'm just going to pretend like, well, actually, that's probably not the best one for him. What's a good one? This looks fine, I guess. So we'll go save image as. I'll put Yuval just so I can read it later. But imagine that it popped up an actual thing that you could select, right? And we'll go here and put that in. Select it. And then we'll save that change so far. And we're going to click on generated portrait. So this sparkle button here will actually go and it will generate that style that we've been using on the rest of our website. So it goes out, it makes use of some of the latest nano banana image models that are really like good at capturing people's likenesses. And while that's going on, we will also have it's going to send a prompt to Claude to kind of compile some information about this person based on the criteria we are most interested in as Mormon transhumanists, and generate a bio for this individual. So we'll give that a second. And it also can suggest for us some, oh yeah, so okay, so we have the generated portrait. We have the, and this is a little bit simplified because of the monitor that I'm on right now, but we have what I think will be quite a good bio, especially one that ties in their transhumanist themes, as well as some of their religious motivations, if any, that they have. And then we have tags that we've already identified of particular topics that are of interest to the association that apply to this person's biography and anything else that we find about them. And then some other things that would make this useful for a search engine that's looking things up, or to someone that wants to share this on social media. And that essentially, as you can see, makes the job of the content curator a lot easier. Now, we still want them to review this content and make sure it looks good and it characterizes our values accurately, but it really enables us to accomplish a lot more with the resources that we have. And you can also see that, when you share this on social media, you now get this like beautiful social sharing preview that will go out to Facebook or wherever you want to share it. And what we're also planning on doing here is having a daily collection of noteworthy quotations, noteworthy concepts to share. And essentially the curator will look at that and pick from among the best and share those as inspiring quotes that could be shared with our friends or whoever. And I want to show you one other thing there that I think is kind of fun. So if I go to, yeah, this is fine. Let's do this one. So when you're sharing a quote, it's actually especially good at fitting everything into the space that's allotted depending on the length of the text. So it's using some really advanced typography placement tools to kind of pick a font size that makes it so that it can be easily read when you share it, but the whole thing fits there. And it puts it on the same kind of background and stuff. And so anyhow, as we use and collect and curate a lot of these quotes, we also have a huge library of ebooks that we've collected of things that are especially relevant to our interests. And if there are any other books you would like to add to that collection, let us know and we can do that. But we have agents that are essentially processing these works and sifting out noteworthy quotations as well that we might want to add to our collection. So we're doing everything we can to sort of automate that process of collection and dissemination of inspiring ideas. I want to show one final thing. I know everyone's kind of tired, but I'm going to show you, I think this would be better for me to show you what's on my current machine because I'm not sure this final image is up live yet. So I'm going to show you the new MTA store, right? Some of you heard yesterday when I was saying that there are a lot of content producers online that make like at least half of their revenue not from YouTube, even though they have millions of subscribers on YouTube, but from selling merch that people want to collect of their of the materials that they're creating and sharing. And we have this really fun new campaign that is, I'm calling it the MTA propaganda campaign. And so you can see one of these first pieces up here and in the broken frame over there. And once again, like when I said we were trying to inspire a new generation of pioneers to explore today's frontiers, I'm being quite literal about that, like in the sense that I'm using our pioneer iconography in these messages. And we have, a Mormon colony or a Mormon starship of settlers landing on a new world. Notice I didn't call it an alien world, I call it a new world, right? And that like ties into some of the phrasing that we read in our own liturgy and stuff. And we have another one that is that invites us to come to Zion. in an O'Neill cylinder or a space habitat. I think I'm going to call this holy habitat or something like that. In thy holy habitations did my spirit once reside. We're taking that just a little bit more literally. No, but a holy space habitat, right? And there's some fun other things that we have in mind that are still being worked on. But if I show you some of those very last ones, I think this will be fun to see. So these are the sketches that were done before the final, right? So this is like an icy outpost on like one of the moons of Jupiter. And the slogan is, support the Perpetual Exploration Fund. This one is a generational starship heading towards a beautiful glowing planet. And the headline is Kolob Beckons. Maybe there's a few other cool lines we could come up with. This one is, your tithing built this station. This one you just saw, come to Zion. There's another alternative tagline that is, join Deseret Colony. This one is, join the Relief Society Terraform Corps. And there are actual women there in the foreground. I just wanted to call your attention to that. They're like, well, anyhow, you know what I mean. I imagine that they're like growing new biomes that will enable like delicious recipes. This was, we don't know exactly what this is supposed to be like a city library, like the whole city is a library. And if you can come up with any cool slogans for that that would be like also Mormon, let me know. I'm sure there are.
Single apartments or something.
Keep working on it. I'm not sure it's there yet, but okay. This one is like an Atlantis kind of thing. So this would be yet another vintage tourism invitation, but I'm not sure what to call it yet. And this is like something about how we're living in the skies. And this is an underwater village. So these are some of the propaganda posters that are still coming out. And I'm sure I could go on and on and on, but you guys are done and everybody's tired. And I want to thank the organizers for putting on such a fun event, actually giving people time to hang out with each other. Giving people time to hang out with each other and like catch up was really, really nice. So thanks again, and please be creative. Think about ways that you can join in and help, because we need it so much. Thank you.